Leaving as fast as they can, people fled the northeastern city of Sumy, trying to get out before nightfall when a ceasefire ends. The night before, airstrikes hit residential buildings and a power plant. Local authorities said 21 people were killed. Further west, people fleeing the city of Irpin, close to the capital Kyiv, crossing a damaged bridge that Russian troops have repeatedly fired on as civilians try to get across. Heartbreaking goodbyes as many of the men split up from their families to go back and fight. Others helping those unable to make the journey by themselves. We are fleeing. She is barely walking, but we are doing our best, thank you. It is good that we could cross the bridge. Bombs are exploding over there, quite intense. Irpin is totally damaged. Meanwhile, in the capital, President Volodymyr Zelensky refusing to flee. A video message to his people, trying to prepare them for the days to come. Snow is falling. This is spring. The war is the same as spring. Severe. But it will be all right. We will win anyway. Military analysts say the Russian onslaught will likely get worse in the coming days. Russian forces are increasingly turning to shelling civilian areas and infrastructure, while their tanks and troops are bogged down outside key cities. In the port city of Odessa, residents are mounting barricades in front of the beloved opera house. So far, the city hasn't been hit, but if the experience of the last several days is any guide, anyone who stays behind should be prepared for the worst.
Let's go to our correspondent Matthias Berlinger in Kyiv. Matthias, what's the situation this morning in the capital?
It's, as always, very calm in the capital. Still, the fighting is limited to those suburbs that you mentioned, Irpin and Bucha, and the area around that airport, and also troops are advancing from the east, but the city center has so far been spared of heavy fighting, and also mostly, not completely, but mostly of heavy bombing. The city is still open. It's still possible to leave the city and to get into the city, and supplies are still getting into the city. So life is tense here, but still possible.
Many civilians have been rescued from the besieged city of Sumy. What about Mariupol in the south?
That looks a lot worse than Sumy. Sumy is already quite bad, and many people have died there as well trying to escape the city. But Mariupol is very dire. It's completely surrounded. It's been completely surrounded for more than a week now, and electricity has been cut, water supplies have been cut. We've seen pictures of children dying of dehydration, and supplies are running low. People are trying to survive on what's left there. It's very, very, very dire.
Matthias, can you give us an idea of where we're at in this battle? As I mentioned before, Ukraine's army says it's managed to slow the advance of Russian forces, which are suffering major setbacks.
It depends on what you see as how you measure it. The idea of the Russian army seems to have been to take Kyiv quickly and then have the government surrender and take control of the country. That has clearly not worked. Resistance has been fierce to this Russian advance. The Ukrainian army has been able to destroy a lot of Russian military technology, and also many Russian soldiers have died or have been captured. So they have the Russian army has considerable losses, but there is also it's also very clear that the Russian army is outnumbering the Ukrainians. They have more supplies that they can bring in. So this is now a battle of two armies wearing each other out. This is what it is about, and whether the Ukraine can continue to resist the Russian army will, of course, depend on its supplies, on the morale, which is still very high, and Russia is advancing, but very slowly.
Matthias Bödinger, appreciate the update. Thank you very much. Maria Avdieva lives in Kharkiv and works at the European Expert Association, focusing on Ukrainian relations with the EU and NATO. Firstly, could you tell us about your personal situation this morning and how bad the destruction is in Kharkiv?
Yes, I'm staying in Kharkiv, and every day I try to go out on the streets to show the world what is happening in Kharkiv, because we see that Russian media tries to show very different picture, and they try to hide what is actually happening in this city and call this Russian war here a special military operation. So I go around and take videos and photos to have these evidences of the war crimes committed here in Kharkiv. There are major destructions in the city center because it was heavily bombarded, and some of the historical buildings are completely destroyed, as the main administrative building, which was the symbol of Kharkiv, and also the residential areas are destroyed, and I can see that the pipelines and the energy is off, so there is no water there, and the buildings stay completely without the windows, no people around, because they apparently have left already. They do not have any place to live anymore, and it is very strange and terrifying to see Kharkiv like this, because it is a big, huge 1.5 million city, and it always was very lively with many people outside. And now you would see only long lines of people standing in front of the shops where they are trying to get some food.
You mentioned the water being cut off there. What's the supply situation like? How much longer can you hold out?
It depends on the region, on the districts in Kharkiv. So the districts that were heavily bombarded, they are cut off the supplies and the infrastructure. But those where there were still no bombardments, for example, in my home, I still do have everything. Happily, still have electricity and water and heating. But of course, we understand that at some point Russia will continue trying to destroy the critical infrastructure for the city, because they will probably try to encircle Kharkiv at one moment when they regroup and get more forces, because for now it looks like the Putin plan didn't work out, and now they are taking some time to get more resources because Ukraine is fighting very effectively on the ground at the moment.
What about these humanitarian corridors that are said to be in effect in Kharkiv and other Ukrainian cities, according to Russia? Can you confirm that?
Actually, I haven't witnessed that myself. I was on the streets yesterday during the day, and I continuously heard the shellings and the explosions here and there. And I saw that the city of Chuguyev and Izum are in critical situation because Russian forces are blockading them, the small towns outside of Kharkiv, and do not give any possibility to supply there something and to get people out of here. So I really doubt that there is any kind of such corridor, and we have seen these maps of Russia that Russian MOD has distributed, showing the ways to evacuate people to Russia and Belarus, and this is nonsense which will never happen here, because it is not possible situation. Russians are here to kill Ukrainians, and now they propose Ukrainian people to flee to Russia, and we all know here are very well aware of the Soviet-style tactics when they had taken the large numbers of people from Ukraine and transferred them to Siberia or some other places in Russia.
Maria Avdieva for us there from the European Expert Association, which focuses on Ukrainian relations with the EU and NATO. Thank you for joining us here on DW.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people escaping the fighting have streamed into the western Ukrainian city of Lviv. It's become a massive bottleneck, the only direction to flee being west. DW correspondent Alexandra van Namen met up with some of them.
We are here at the railway station in Lviv, and you can see how busy it is here with long lines of people trying to get on a train to the Polish border. Mothers with their small kids, women with their pets, with hastily packed suitcases and plastic bags. Many of them seem to be traumatized. Many of them are worried sick about the loved ones that they left behind.
Мы из Харькова.
We're from Kharkiv. This city is gone.
Города нет. Вопрос у меня. Кому это нужно?
I just have one question. What was it all for? Who benefits from destroying such a beautiful city? We once had a wonderful mayor. He's now turning over in his grave. You can't look at that's left of the city without crying. I was born there. I grew up there. I spent my whole life there.
У меня вся жизнь, мне 50 лет, у меня вся жизнь там прошла, понимаете?
Люди просто...
People there now have been left for dead. They're hiding in basements. I can't even think about it.
They're sitting there without any electricity, water, or heating. My mother's hiding in a cellar. Her mother is in Mariupol. She can't get hold of her.
I haven't heard anything from her since March 2nd.
Never would I have expected something like this to happen, especially from Russia and Belarus. I have so many relatives in Moscow.
According to the city authorities, it is becoming increasingly difficult to provide all the refugees with food and clothes, and first and foremost with a place to stay. That is why many people here are desperate to get out, even though they don't know whether they will be able to come back.
I don't know. I never thought I'd have to flee.
I don't know where we will go. Whatever God's plan is certainly to Poland.
We are not leaving forever. We'll be back for sure.
Many of the people we met are originally from the Russian-speaking part of the country. They told us they would never expect Russia to attack Ukraine. They are angry and sad, and some of them have a clear message to Vladimir Putin.
I don't understand why you are against our membership in the EU and are now literally pushing us towards Europe. Thank you very much. But please, it cannot come at the cost of our lives and those of Russians, only in a peaceful way.
Honestly, I think Putin knows he is sick and will die soon, and he wants to take as many people with him as possible. We live in the 21st century. We don't live in the 20th century anymore, during the Second World War. We're civilized people. But how civilized is it for the whole of Ukraine to leave Ukraine? Well done. You have liberated us. Thank you.
The United Nations says more than 2 million people have now fled the conflict in Ukraine into neighbouring countries. French firefighters are among those on the Polish-Ukrainian border helping the refugees. They say most of the people arriving there are traumatised and exhausted. Efforts are underway to set up makeshift hospitals in the region to care for the new arrivals. Volunteer Michael Heckmart has been setting up those operating tents on the Polish border and has witnessed the huge wave of refugees. Good to see you, Michael. As I mentioned there,
Hi, hello.
2 million Ukrainians have fled, at least half into Poland. Have you ever seen anything like it?
I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. I didn't expect it to be that huge and that big. People who come to the border often walk for 20 or more kilometers because most of them are brought there by private buses, and the drivers are fit for the army, so they can't really bring them to the exact border point. They go on foot. I haven't seen a 5-kilometer line of people waiting for the passport control ever in my life. The tricky part is that on the Ukrainian side of the border, there is barely any light. It's dark, it's super cold, and these people stand there for about 7 to 10 hours waiting to get to Poland, where they'll be helped and where they'll be safe.
And what sort of a state are they in when they arrive? I know you've been setting up these tents to help them. What sort of a state are they in?
I helped setting up medical tents in the humanitarian aid point at Szczecinie. They're mostly traumatized. Hypothermia is probably the most the state that they're in. Children are tired, women give birth, stress-induced labor is very common, and cardiac arrest as well. So, but above all, they don't really know where they are and how long it is going to take them to cross the border. So we try to inform them as much as possible, calm them down, and take care of them by distributing food and drinks which they can consume standing outside.
And I guess a lot of them don't know where they're going. How do you decide where to go?
Well, the first thing is that when they arrive in Poland, the Polish border control is very well organized, and there are buses provided by the firefighters, which bring them to the reception point in Przemyśl, which is a town 20 kilometers away from the border. And at that point, they are able to get food, they're able to shower, they're able to take a rest, they're able to sleep there. And there are private cars and people are welcoming them at their homes and all over Poland, basically. So there's this center which connects drivers and hosts with refugees. So far, there hasn't been a need to set up any refugee camp in Poland, even though over 1 million people crossed the border.
And what about psychological help for these people? What have they been telling you about their journey across Europe's biggest country with a war going on around them?
Well, I've been escorting a couple of families with small children from Kyiv through the border. We also managed to drive a bus through the border full of children through the border ourselves, as in volunteers. And they're all scared. They're all scared of helicopters, of airplanes. They're scared of bombs. They're scared of death, basically. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to comfort them. I'm not a trained psychologist, but there are people helping them in Przemyśl in Poland at the reception point.
Michael Hekmat, one of the volunteers helping refugees arriving from Ukraine. Thank you very much for giving us this insight into the conflict. Thank you. And a look now at some other developments in the war. Police in the Russian city of St. Petersburg have detained a group of women protesting against the invasion of Ukraine. They were holding up posters which can get you arrested, appalled about the deaths of Russian soldiers. Moscow has passed tough penalties for speaking out against the military. Credit rating agency Fitch has downgraded Russian debt by 6 notches to C, saying that a default is imminent. The agency says sanctions and trade restrictions could undermine Russia's willingness to service its debt. The Western measures have thrown the country's financial markets into turmoil following its invasion of Ukraine. The United States has dismissed an offer by Poland to send its fleet of MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. Warsaw intended to give the Soviet-era aircraft to Washington for use by the Ukrainian military. The Pentagon was concerned that Russia could view the three-way deal as a hostile move. But US President Joe Biden has announced a ban on Russian oil imports in response to the invasion. It comes as the United States struggles with rising fuel prices and inflation. The US imports only a small percentage of its oil from Russia, but the ban is expected to push oil prices even higher. Here's what President Biden had to say.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in the Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support their Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war.
The European Union is more reluctant to cut itself off from Russian energy. Brussels has laid out a plan to drastically reduce imports by the end of the year and cut them entirely by 2030. Getting there won't be easy. With tensions between Russia and the EU escalating over the Ukraine invasion, it may have to come much sooner.
Russia is now openly threatening to cut off gas supplies to Europe completely. This would lead to enormous bottlenecks for the entire EU. Gas is primarily used to heat homes, in ovens in production processes, in power plants to produce electricity. A sudden supply stop would push up energy prices dramatically. Prices for oil and gas have already risen steeply. Consumers are feeling the pressure at the petrol pumps and on their gas bills. Before the Russian attack, a megawatt hour of gas cost 69 euros, already more expensive than consumers were used to. Since then, in just 2 weeks, the price of the EEX energy exchange has rocked to a record high of 335 euros. And the outlook is uncertain. No one knows whether Russia will make good on its threat and turn off the tap completely. The EU now wants to completely become independent of Russia. Repower EU is the name of its new strategy. At its core, diversifying energy suppliers and drawing more from renewable sources like solar and biogas.
Renewables give us the freedom to choose an energy source that is clean, cheap, reliable, and ours. And instead of continuing to fund fossil fuel imports and fund Russian oligarchs, renewables create new jobs here in Europe.
The EU wants to replace 2/3 of Russian gas imports by the end of the year, an ambitious target.
This will end our over-dependency and give us much-needed room to maneuver. 2/3 by the end of this year. It's hard, bloody hard, but it's possible if we're willing to go further and faster than we've done before.
The EU already has plans for its energy transition, but the war in Ukraine has officials startled, forcing them to make the switch far faster than previously thought possible.
The refugee exodus is seeing thousands of Ukrainians arrive here in Berlin every day. It's caught the capital off guard and is pushing resources to the limit. Berlin says it can't cope alone and has appealed for help from other parts of the country.
Safe at last, far from the war. The Ukrainian refugees at this shelter arrived in Berlin a few days ago. Traumatized and exhausted, very few were willing to talk to us. One woman from the besieged city of Kharkiv told us she finally managed to get some sleep after arriving here. She can't hold back her tears. My sister is still there. She lives in an apartment block on the 8th floor. She told me she'll never leave. She'd rather die there. Bombs and missiles are raining down on the city. About 140 people have found temporary shelter here. They're being cared for, in part by an NGO that operates shelters like these. Its manager tells us time is of the essence in this crisis. I got a call at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning to say that people would be moving in that day. My colleagues worked like crazy in constant shifts to get everything ready. 2 buses arrived carrying refugees in the course of the day, and we thought that was it. But by evening, another bus pulled up to our door with no advance notice. After arriving at Berlin's central train station, people are taken to their accommodation. More than 10,000 refugees from Ukraine are arriving every day. The city has sounded the alarm, saying it can't cope. Germany's interior minister has promised to help. We are evaluating how to provide refugees from the war zones with a place to stay in Germany. Naturally, they can't all stay in Berlin. The city can't cope on its own. The government is working on a plan to coordinate the distribution of refugees, but all of Germany's states have pledged to take people in. I just want to say thank you to Germany for helping us in this situation. And I will try to help the country in any way I can. It will take time to settle refugees across Germany. Until then, Berlin will have to continue rolling out the help for new arrivals.
This is DW News Live from Berlin. I'm Ben Fazul, and thanks for watching. I'll leave you with some pictures taken by photographers on the ground in Ukraine, where the humanitarian crisis is worsening for people across the country.